Oklahoma legacy, and of course the good doctor. And then ironically, Putski, Black Bart, and Bobby Duncombe Jr. were all Texans. So he had that natural rivalry that fans in that region could actually understand and get into.
He's going to continue to do some shots for ECW. But the most notable thing I should mention is he actually takes a pinfall loss to Raven, of all people, crossing the line again. Happened February 1st, 1997. And on this show, we would see Doc make short work of Axel Rotten and then challenge Raven for the ECW world title. And Raven picks up a pinfall victory. And I think this is the first time Doc had been pinned in the United States since 87. So like almost 10 years. Do you know, what the thinking here is? Is this just Paul Lee wanting to legitimize his champion a little more? And hey, I know you don't normally lose here in the States, but what if I made it worth your while?
Pretty much. Yeah. Paul was smart enough to know that Doc was not going to be full time for long term because of his New Japan, or excuse me, his All Japan relationship and his legacy there. So he knew that Raven, Scotty Levy, was probably going to be was going to be around. And so it was smart booking on Paul's part. But, Doc was not against putting people over. It's just that that's just how he was booked. That's why a lot of those situations when we talked earlier about his matches he had with Flair, I think they all ended in a DQ. And Doc never took a pinfall loss, which I would not have booked it that way. If the world champion can't beat you, then, something's wrong here. And somebody with a high skill set like Flair should be able to beat anybody by hook or crook or whatever it may be. But I thought that was not a smart move. All these DQ finishes, I'm not a big fan of them, as you can tell. To me, it's lazy booking, quite frankly. You can't figure out a finish. Well, let's just throw it out. And I think that's a lazy, cheap-ass way of doing business, quite frankly. The DQs are good if you're going somewhere with it. But more often than not, it's just a way to placate talents. Dr. Death did not need placating to do the honors. And the money for Paul was smart. He knew that Raven's staying, Doc's going. That's how you do business. And Doc had been raised the right way within the pro wrestling business. And if Cowboy Bill Watts had heard that Doc would refuse to put somebody over, there would have been a trip to the woodshed, figuratively, for Doc and Cowboy, because that's just not the way that he was brought into the business. You do your job. And if you're going to take Paul Heyman's money, then whether you like it or you don't, you do what he wants you to do on this night. And if it's unattainable and you don't like it that much, just don't go back. But don't no-show and don't refuse to do the honors for somebody that's trying to build their territory.
Let's talk about July 25th, 1997. Steve's going to team up with Gary Albright, and they're going to win over Johnny Ace and Kenta Kobashi to win the tag titles again in All Japan. They drop them back October 4th, again to Ace and Kobashi. And that gets us to 1998. Steve's going to come to the World Wrestling Federation for the very first time. This has your fingerprints all over it. Talk to me about how this came to be.
Well, Bruce Pritchard and I were working in the office, and both of us had great familiarity with Doc. He was a guy that we liked. We thought we could depend on. His reliability, his toughness, and all that stuff was just beyond compare. And we were running out of opponents. I used this analogy before, much like we were running out of opponents for The Undertaker. And then Vince reluctantly let me sign Mick Foley. So I said, we need opponents. And I kind of took that philosophy. And the illustration I gave Vince that time, I said, I know you're not a big mainstream sports fan, but if you are in the NBA Western Conference at that time, you got to be able to beat the Lakers. And to be able to beat the Lakers, you got to have a defensive player that can match up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because he was their guy. He was the difference maker. He needed to win the division, to get to the playoffs and get to the promised land. You got to beat the Lakers, and to beat the Lakers, you got to cover Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Same thing with Undertaker. We were running out of viable opponents. That's why that's how I convinced Vince to sign Mick, and let me sign Mick, and we did, and the rest of it worked out really well for everybody. So I think the same thing here. we thought Austin needed a fresh opponent, somebody that would propose a physical and image, a challenge to Steve Austin, the Stone Cold. And that was the idea. It didn't have anything to do with, well, the winner of the brawl for all gets it. I don't know where that story came from. That's the biggest crock of shit that there is. There was never any discussion, and I'm sure Bruce would back me up on this deal. There was never a deal made that when Doc wins the brawl for it all, because the brawl for it all, we brought Doc in, was not. It was a concept. So, but we thought that if we got Doc ready and he was healthy, we'd get one nice run and maybe a pay-per-view main event with Doc and Stone Cold. That was the idea, simply to get another opponent for Austin and for a one-off deal. I think we paid Doc like $300,000 or $400,000, I think it was. And he wanted to come to WWF. He was the big time, and he had never been there, and all that good stuff. So another challenge for him in a different locker room. But his reputation preceded him. Look, a lot of the boys knew how great Misawa and all those other cats were in All Japan, and Doc had been booked with them and on top with them. They had put him over. He was a big star, but obviously injuries and the strong style that they compete in, the stiffness was taking its toll on him. So we knew that he was on the other side of his greatest years, but we thought that there was enough gas in the tank to get us a one-off program with Stone Cold and get Stone Cold a very significant and viable win. There was never going to be any issue with that. The finish was with Austin and Dr. Death. Doc was fine. But the brawl for it all really cut the legs out of all that whole plan of maybe getting Doc ready if we got him over to work with Austin. And if Austin was agreeable, because Doc was a very physical, and a lot of guys, he intimidated a lot of guys. I'm not saying he intimidated Stone Cold. I'm just saying that his reputation preceded him. He's a brute, and he's going to work snug. And a lot of guys loved that, and some guys were leery of it because they saw those doctor drivers on Misawa, and they sure as hell didn't want any part of that.
And now, an excerpt from the audiobook version of Under the Black Hat by Jim Ross, available now.
Vince was always opinionated, animated, and sometimes sharp in my headset. But rarely was he so aggressive in his producing of my work. He wanted SmackDown to be perfect from day one, and he was putting that pressure squarely on me. King gave me his favorite son smile. Jerry never got notes from Vince, not one effing time. Kevin Dunn chimed back in. 5, 4, 3. This is a whole new audience, JR. God damn it, Vince shouted. Talk to them. Tell them who we are. King's smile turned into a chuckle as he heard what a shitty night I was having. Jerry did not like drama, and Vince knew that. The King didn't have the mindset to deal with long-term tension. If Vince wanted the best performance from Jerry Lawler, he knew not to confront him. So I got it instead. You got it? Vince asked. Yep, I replied to the boss. I got it. And now we're back live. New set, new colors, new opening, new channel, same announce team. I think that's what was bothering Vince so much. I was finding out live on the air that we were not ready.
Under the Black Hat, the audiobook, and all formats are available at jrsbbq.com and wherever books are sold. Get yours today at jrsbbq.com.
Let's keep it moving. Let's talk about April 28th. It's his first match in the WWF. He defeats Too Cold Scorpio. He does briefly return to Japan for a few weeks to team up with Gary Albright in several matches, but he's back in time to compete in the Brawl for All. We just recently saw all about this on the Dark Side of the Ring. That's the reason it's so topical, I suppose. July 14th, he would pick up a win over Pierre, who we now know was PCO in the Brawl for All. The next week, he would face Bart Gunn. It all sort of changes that day. Bart Gunn picks up the win. He's knocked out. Steve tears his hamstring in the process. You're doing commentary. What are you thinking as this is happening right in front of you?
Well, I couldn't diagnose him. I knew he was hurt. You could tell by the grimace on his face. I knew something was wrong. Something was wrong big time. And then when he found out the diagnosis that the hamstring tore completely off the bone and rolled up his leg and he continued to fight, that's Dr. Death. A lot of guys would throw the towel in, the referee to give the X signal, this is over, get us some medical help out here. But the hard-headed son of a bitch kept fighting. And then he got his ass knocked out because his hands are down. What does a one-legged man do in an ass-kicking contest, Conrad? you don't fare very well. So right. that was a setback. One of the many setbacks that we encountered through the brawl for it all. But that injury ostensibly ended Steve's career in WWF and for all practical intent and purposes on a major level. And that was a goddamn shame. It was really a shame. And again, I look back at that brawl for it all as a complete waste of time. I don't give two shits if it did great minute by minutes or quarter-hour ratings. It affected the lives and the livelihood of more than one athlete. And that's not good booking. That's not great creative, in my estimation. So it was heartbreaking. Once again, well, here's what happened. Here's the diagnosis. So he's got to have his quadricep. The quadricep is called in anatomy the quadricep femoris, and it means the four-headed thigh muscle, and that is the largest muscle in your entire body, your thigh, and he ripped it completely off, rolled up his leg, and how the son of a bitch dealt with the pain, the restriction, and his own career mortality was pretty damned amazing. I can tell you that, because he didn't say, you got to stop it. He kept got up, one-legged. It's disturbing to watch. And then all of a sudden, of course, Bart with that great left hand, kaboom, and down goes the doctor. The doctor is no longer in service.
He's back in the ring on October 24th, 1998 for the NWA 50th anniversary show. He's going to win a battle royal here. Tons of talent in that battle royal. Kurt Angle, Test, Sean Stasiak, Steve Corino, Teddy Hart, Tom Pritchard, Giant Silva, Tiger Ali Singh, Glenn Kolka, lots of names you would recognize. By January of 99, he's back with the WWF. He's going to win a dark match over Bob Holly before Sunday Night Heat. And then, and I guess we need to talk about the creative here. You start managing him. Tell me how this comes to be.
Well, it was a creative idea, and I was not comfortable doing it. Didn't see any reason to do it, but that was not the consensus there. It was another way to make JR uncomfortable. But the issue was, for me, that I made it not about JR, even though I didn't like the casting, i.e. the booking. Didn't want to do that. To me, it was just another step in trying to pry me out of the announced position on Monday Night Raw. Hence the little announce table. Doc was my bodyguard, all this stuff. It just was silly, because who was the heat on? Who was the object of getting the heat? Me. I'm not going to wrestle. I ended up doing some shit in the ring. It wasn't wrestling. It was just a cow and ice bullshit. But with the wrong guy was getting the spotlight. I didn't need it. Didn't want it. But I thought if I did this and it would help Doc,
right,
I'm willing to do it. But I also knew that the underlying current was, this is not to help Doc. This is to make JR uncomfortable and be embarrassed. And the ribs, the rib on JR is just a continuation of previous ribs and subsequent ribs going forward, because Vince enjoyed that. And when the writers find out what Vince enjoys, that's what they write. They want to ingratiate themselves in the sycophant way that they are, because Vince likes this, so I know I can get this idea through. So there we went. So the priority, the focus was on the wrong guy. It wasn't designed to help Doc. I don't care what anybody says, because how could you in any sane way perceive that this is going to get Doc over?
Right.
It's not. So again, but again, if it would, and maybe I've been wrong, I'm going to try it. For Doc's sake, I'm going to give this my best effort, but it was a stupid creative positioning in my estimation.
Here's something